took a long hiatus, making sure that the book is faced the right way and that the microphone is working. Testing 1, 2. Welcome back. Book 1, Chapter 10. The venue is tucked away amongst miles and miles of... Let me start that one again. The venue is... I got stuck on the word miles. The venue is tucked away amongst miles and miles of identical one-story gray warehouses. The town called Pamperville, which is Naperville, is still in Illinois. It should be familiar. Touring is a good way to discover that your state is of the endless kind. Roads go on for an eternity toward and away from nowhere. It is possible to have a 7-hour separation between Chicago and one of its surrounding cities. You have discovered through touring that there is an illusion of closeness in regard to all areas of Illinois, especially when discussing Chicago. The illusion may come from its Chicago natives referring to their state while on tour in other lands or other distant parts of the USA as Chicago instead of Illinois. This happened to me again, actually, just when I started the Japanese gig. I've gotten to the point where I just say Chicago instead of Illinois because no one has any idea what Illinois is. Where are you from? Illinois. Illinois? Chicago. Oh, Chicago. People continually show more of a reaction to the word Chicago than to Illinois. Perhaps this gives the impression that all areas in Illinois are in close proximity to Chicago. This particular show is not so far from Chicago. It is about 2 to 3 hours away. Some of the kids from Pamperville travel to shows in Chicago on a regular basis. I don't think it's that far away. I think it's more like 45 minutes. Maybe I'll look it up and tell you in the addendum. It is hard to imagine for someone like you, who lives so close to the largest city in Illinois, one of the largest in the country, according to the road atlas, with which Mr. Famous likes to quote geographical trivia, having to drive back and forth on 2 to 5 hour trips to seek out the most minimalist amounts of fun. Pamperville is one of the most conservative towns in mid-America. One day in the future, while you are watching the news, there will be an announcement that Pamperville is the safest, most bestest place to live in the country. Never mind that the youth is decaying on the inside, either turning to hardcore usage of drugs and running away or turning towards its frightening extreme. Pamperville is the breeding ground for the Illinois straight-edgers. What is the world coming to when its youth are rebelling toward convention, embracing the skin-deep political stances of the 50s? You are strongly against the abuse of alcohol or drugs, even though you are prone to drink yourself, silly, every once in a while. The abuse is everywhere, and there is so much pain in the world that you can understand the need to drink or to escape. But we all have to eventually make personal decisions to work out our problems, and vices never seem to be the answer. It is a personal decision, or it can be a decision made amongst yourself and close friends and family. Wow, this book got very serious all of a sudden. These straight-edgers are yet another group that proudly display uniform clothes and slogans that shrink the need for free thought, and, ironically, openly belittle other alternative choices and lifestyles. You don't have any particular grievances against political or social movements created to better the world. You just don't trust human nature to involve itself in mass movements with complete honesty and without ultimately coercing and harming others. Franklin once said while discussing straight edge, if someone hasn't at least tried drugs or alcohol, I don't trust him. You think he has a very good point, although there may be some exceptions to the rule. Mr. Famous doesn't often give voice to the grays in between his statements. You have a suspicion that he actually does believe they exist. It's more about having discovered that people listen to you when you speak strongly, shockingly, and clearly. It provokes intense arguments where the defense almost always fights back with a side even more extreme. You live in the gray area. No stances make much sense to you, but you are able to see this way of extreme, point-of-viewed arguing. Wait, let me say that again. No stances make much sense to you, But you are able to see that this way of extreme, point-of-viewed arguing can create intelligent conversation while, at the same time, inspire violence or become just a stubborn intellectual exercise, defending the right to avoid change. I was actually talking about this recently, about how the people that seem to think they have a strong idea about what is right and what is wrong, what is black and what is white, often have better memories. I don't know if that's true, but it's something I think I talk about that later. Let's see. Amber is driving her junkyard caddy, supposedly following close behind the Malibu. Mr. Famous looks into the rearview mirror, and you look out the passenger window to see if her car is still in sight. You're a very good driver, Mr. Famous. That's good of you to notice, J.J. I don't only say this to put me in good favor by sprinkling you with accolades. I understand the frustration of leading. Leading is not as easy as it appears. Vittles leans forward from the back seat. What in tarnation are you two getting at, Bunky? He laughs at his own attempt at a southern drawl. Franklin is a very good driver to follow. Leading is not always as easy as it may appear. The driver, you point to Franklin, he then raises his hand in the air for the moment and puts it back on the steering wheel, has to be aware at all stoplights, holding back for making the last second dive through the intersection during a yellow light and leaving the follower stranded. And if this blunder does happen to occur, Franklin chimes in, the driver must pull over and wait for the following vehicle before proceeding. I couldn't have said it better myself. As long as we are giving a lesson to Vittles here, why don't we discuss the correct usage of a turn signal while leading? Good idea. The lead driver, son, are you listening? Franklin looks at Vittles through the rearview mirror. Sure am, Pops. The lead driver must give warning of left or right turns they are about to make in order for the follower to safely continue the convoy without getting sideswiped or rear-ended. And then, realizing his frustration with the discussion he had with the younger promoter from Naperville on the phone earlier today, he says, which is fucking difficult on this excursion since these particular directions are useless. It's really funny. I messed up a little bit with this with the voices. I like to add voices, but I was thinking during it that this is one of those incidences where this conversation never actually happened. It's all fictionalized dialogue. It is that... What did I say here? Not so musical journey through toothless situations with 80% fictitious dialogue. This is part of that 80% fictitious dialogue. But what I was trying to actually get across is that there would be fun sort of playing with words and, being sort of ironic all the time in the van. Usually Ben and Vapid were better at doing it between the two of them, but sometimes I would join in. I don't usually... In this book, I tend to say that I'm one of the one that provokes this sort of activity, but in reality, I was not the one. I was much more quiet at the time, and it was usually started by Vapid or Ben. So anyway, there is no such thing as MapQuest during these touring days, so all directions rely upon the ambiguous intellects of individual promoters and road maps with missing streets. I see. Vittles leans back. He shakes his head back and forth, picks up a zine off the floor and begins reading it to himself, and then he leans forward again. I am now intrigued. As a potential driver on this upcoming tour, I would like to know more of what you two speak. Gladly. Would you like to continue, Franklin? No, you go right ahead, Mr. Bed. The name of a street or a visual marker may spring up as if from nowhere. On the expressway, the driver must watch out for cars cutting in between the followers and the leader. When changing lanes, it is always best for the leader to signal and then pause before veering into the next lane, allowing the follower to change lanes first, making it easier for the leader to pass freely into the next lane while simultaneously ensuring the follower's understanding of the lane change. Soul Food, who has been trying to take a catnap this whole time, grabs the back of Vittles' shirt and pulls him back into the seat. Why don't you discuss the use of seat belts while you're at it? You assholes are keeping me awake. who's this? It's Vittles. Oh, that's actually Vermin, isn't it? Yeah. This is I was thought it would have been Vapid here, but this actually Vittles, who is Brian Vermin, was also one of the instigators of discussions like this. I just thought about that because the show in Naperville that I'm leading to, Vapid wasn't there, and I can't remember what I called him right now. Was it Muddle? Well, we'll see. Anyway, back to it. The intense discussing of the art of following and leading may seem a bit over the top, but is the type of conversation you and Franklin and the rest of the band like to engage in while on road trips. The topics of the conversations are usually quite bizarre, like the 4-page and growing list of technical and colloquial nicknames for breasts that Mr. Famous and Vittles started, provoked by the 1950s sex novels Soul Food liked to read. In the near future, after Soul Food quits music and Muddle, that's Vapid, takes his place on bass, during all 10,000 miles of the Malibu tour, the band will work diligently on this list. Even you, who will have very few to add, and will frequently consider it slightly offensive, for the most part, find it astoundingly engrossing. It will be worked on for days and days and will remain incomplete well through till the end of the band more than 12 years later. And yes, you do now sometimes hear yourself saying things like, "Look at those tatas," or "I bet she has silver dollar nipples." You and Mr. Famous have had some of the most intense, intriguing discussions about hemorrhoids and their effect on the psychological state of a punk who are dealing with growing old. You are unsure during all points of these conversations and task-oriented activities how much of the analyzing and scrutinizing is actually necessary, and how much of it is just for the sake of enjoying what others would find tedious or even pointless. Even the crucial topic of following and leading begins to sound absurd after an hour of fervid discourse has elapsed. Amber obviously has never had a life-altering conversation about following and leading. Keeping watch of her caddy involves all of the passengers in this car, Mr. Franklin, Vittles, Soul Food, and yourself. She drives fast, hanging dangerously close to the Malibu's bumper, and then she drives slow, falling far behind. Every now and then she tries to pass the Malibu, even though she has no idea where she is going. This is a trait that she shares with Skunk, but Skunk is much worse. He sometimes forgets he's driving. But today he is not forgetting because he is not driving. Skunk is in the back seat. This posse consists of only 2 cars, packed beyond capacity with instruments, punks, and drums. The old trustworthy Malibu and the junkyard caddy. You look out the back window of the Malibu into the caddy's front window. Amber is chatting away with the 2 boys from Swindle Parlor, looking more often toward the back seat than out to the front windshield. Marianne sits beside her on top of Mickle's lap. Mickle and Marianne are kissing, as always, and periodically throwing things at each other, which is kind of ridiculous as their faces aren't more than a couple inches apart. That's punk love. Skunk is crushed in between Eggert and Errol, swishing his hair back and forth in their faces. He is mostly quiet, staring occasionally at Mickle and Marianne while they kiss, and quickly look away when one of them looks at the back seat. Skunk just doesn't appear to be having any fun today. Now, as I'm reading this, I'm also realizing that it is true, because I did that Crimpshrine podcast, and he reminded me that Aaron was actually our drummer for this gig in Naperville. So Vittles, who is actually Brian Vermin in real life, wasn't on this ride. But that's the way my mind works, and I admitted in the book. You and Mr. Famous should have demanded that Swindle Parlor ride in the Malibu with the rest of your band. If Swindle Parlor gets lost, there will be no show this afternoon. This audience doesn't want to see the little less unknowns. They don't give a shit. They want to see Swindle Parlor, the California band on Duck Records. But luckily for the following talents of Mr. Famous and the rest of the band, both cars make it to the venue safely and early as usual. This is another characteristic you and Franklin nurture. Always arrive on time or early, but never late. And since the band has to spend much time on strangers' floors, nurturing social habits that help promote the band in a good light are very important. Along with it being ethically responsible, some useful touring etiquette that either have or will be learned include, And now I name a few of these off. And these are all very true. We were actually very rule-oriented and neat as possible when we actually visited and stayed with punks in their punk houses. 1. Always pay for and help prepare the food made in your host's house. This includes sharing it with them. Unless they are vegans and you are cooking meat while they are out for the day, in this case, you might want to think twice before saturating their house with the smell of burning flesh. A lesson learned while on tour. It was admittedly kind of funny. We stayed in, I forgot the name of the zine. It was like Hippie Core. I think it was in Phoenix or Tucson, but we actually... These guys were really nice, but they freaked out the time that we had actually cooked burgers in their house. And it makes sense, but they were still kind to us, but they were pretty angry. 2, never leave without having cleaned the host's dishes. We've always done that, and even a Blackouts does that too. 3, if there is enough time, vacuum and organize the host's living space. 4, give the host a free record or shirt of their choosing if they want it. Absolutely do not make them take something. That's pretty funny. 5, always say thank you before leaving your host. 6, when leaving a venue, check to make sure you have all your equipment. And more importantly, check to see if you have accidentally packed another band's instruments or accessories. This happened to us in, where was that? It was in one of the New York cities that isn't New York City. And we actually got to the next venue before they found out. They were really drunk, so we were like, fuck them, but we called them. We meant to send them back, and I don't think we ever did send them back. That's one of the... I think that's probably why I put it in here, because I felt bad. There's probably the one incident where we actually didn't follow through. Okay. 7, if you have indeed packed another band's accessories, this might be it, in with yours, take them out and give them back before leaving. A lesson that was learned too late while on tour. Did they really expect you to package up all those stands and cymbals and send them back UPS while still on the road? Actually, that story is a bit more complicated. Before leaving, Vittles found the cymbals and asked if they belonged to anybody. The other band, Stoners, every fucking one of them, said no. So you took the cymbals. Now that is true. I wouldn't have remembered that, so good thing I'm reading this. That night, you stayed at their drummer's house, told him the story about the accessories, and he still didn't realize they were his. 2 weeks down the road, he had his mother's lawyers send a threatening letter to the band's post box. Oh, that's true. I forgot about that. This is not very good etiquette. But then again, neither was your refusal to send the equipment back once the band had received this letter. Yeah, see, I think I probably felt bad about that till the day I wrote this book. Number 8, never trust a promoter until they have paid you, and then still don't trust them. This doesn't mean you can't like him or her, just don't trust them. Even if they are funny and tell you that your band is one of their favorites, that may give even more reason not to trust them. Is that clear? Number 9, smile when someone tries to piss you off. 10, and the flip side, if someone accidentally pisses you off, let them know so they don't do it again. Ignore etiquette 9 if it occurs directly after etiquette 10. This person may have something wrong with them. Number 11. When driving late at night in the middle of nowhere, flash your headlights or blinkers when it is safe for a vehicle, especially a large truck, to pass you. They most likely will return the appreciation by flashing their rear blinkers. Congratulations! You've just made friendly contact with a stranger. The kindness gives you a good euphoric feeling when lost, sleepless, and dirty. I used to do this too because it would kind of keep me awake, after like 10-hour drives and we were driving all night. Sometimes it would keep me awake to be aware of all the other, you want to be aware of all the cars, but, but be aware of this little game of being polite to them and letting them pass and stuff. Keeps me awake. Okay. You step out of the Malibu, and the skateboarder speeds by, just barely missing the tips of your toes. All of the doors of the wide, oblong, gray warehouse are opened. Along the backside, you can see the front third of a parked ambulance. A few paramedics are leaning on the hood, eating sandwiches and reading magazines. This is routine for them. It is a prerequisite established by the parents of the community council. There must be an ambulance at all skating events in case of emergency. The parking lot and the space is huge. The inside and outside is packed with kids on skateboards, hundreds of kids speeding along on their skateboards, some of their bodies padded beyond recognition, and some others scarred beyond recognition. They move in and out and about the room like excited, heated neutrons. bumping into each other, bumping over and under one another. As you walk through one of the entrances, you witness a kid crashing into a speaker cabinet as it is being moved into space by two of the promoter's volunteer lackeys. The kid's skateboard continues onward across the room while he lies flat on his back, grabbing for his knee. Mr. Famous enters moments later carrying the instrument that the two of you will use while playing tag team substitute bass for Swindle Parlor. "It's a fucking zoo in here," he says with a purposely audible soda voice. "Whose ingenious idea was this?" He steps around the kid still keeled over on the floor. "Excuse me, little boy. We have work to do." He then turns to you and whispers purposely inaudible to others, "Is he going to be okay? I think so. Let's just do this fucking thing and get out of here." It takes a little time, but with some perseverance you track down the promoter. He is about 17 years old with glasses strapped to his eyes. He is clenching a skateboard under his arm. It is decorated with Black Flag, Presidential Debauchery, and Interrogation League stickers. Look, I actually named Black Flag. I love when I just make up names, but then I put real bands in there too. I don't know, that tickles me pink. There it goes. Interrogation League is gaining quite a reputation. That's Operation Ivy. It is almost frightening how popular they have become in such a short amount of time. Under his other arm, he is carrying a handwritten itinerary with small hatch marks and scribbles incomprehensible to you and barely discernible to himself. "Where should we set up?" "Right over there." As he goes to point in the direction of the stage, the skateboard falls from under his arm and rolls away. The two of you watch it head straight toward the eye of the skateboarding hurricane. One kid manages to maneuver his skateboard around the moving obstacle, but another kid slightly behind the first is not as skilled and crashes into the renegade vehicle. He tumbles across the floor, taking out 3 or 4 other skaters before coming to a painful halt against the concrete wall. The rest of the room continues on with their furious activity without a blink of an eye. The promoter sends one of his lackeys to retrieve his skateboard. "The band's set up on top of that, right over there." "You've got to be joking." In the center of the madness, there's a square platform raised 6 feet off the ground, no more than 10 feet by 10 feet in width. One on each side of the platform, there are skateboard ramps set at different inclines, all 4 of them leading upward into the mug of anyone who is standing facing any direction on the platform. At this moment, the sound man is taping an electrical cord down from the wall to the platform. A few skaters trip over the cord as it is being taped into place. The sound man occasionally shakes the cord like a lion tamer's whip of exaggerated proportions in order to get more of its length to unwind from the tangled snake pile that sits on the stage. Many of the board skateboarders looking for a challenge attempt to jump over their appearing and disappearing humps. Some kids fall flat on their noses and chins, and others skate away with their hands raised above their heads in triumph. As you are pondering the many possible tragic outcomes that may occur between now and the end of the show, you see Mr. Famous and the rest of the band exiting and entering one of the large doors, setting the instruments and accessories into a pile. You begin to think to yourself, "You're going to love this." Vittles is already loving it. Without an ounce of sarcasm, he is amongst the kids, of which he is one, skateboarding, trying to make his board do tricks. He is having fun. He does not take skateboarding too seriously, and is not disappointed by his inferior abilities. Unlike many skaters, he does not spend his time contrasting his abilities with most of the other more talented sportsmen. He doesn't even seem to care. He gets frustrated occasionally and throws his skateboard against the wall, but then he giggles like a devious child. Like I said, I really don't think Brian Verman was here, but this is a pretty good description of how he would be on tour. His own anger makes him laugh. He should be helping move the equipment, or at least watching over his own drum set. You should tell him to help. If this type of disregard goes on too long, band members have a tendency to become agitated martyrs. In fact, that is how you are beginning to feel right now. But how can you even think of reprimanding this new kid on the block when he has such a pleasant smile plastered across his face? Everyone decides independently of each other to let him have his day. He is new in the band and is not yet completely aware of the over-the-top work ethic Mr. Famous and you enforce. Also, he is the only skateboarder that has ever been or will ever be in the band. His enthusiasm for this foreign entertainment is a bit intriguing. Mr. Famous will occasionally hop on Vittle's skateboards on tours in the near future or on breaks during current rehearsals. Mr. Famous is a horrible skateboarder. That's exactly what Franklin expects of himself. He lavishes in his lack of talent for the skateboard. He gets a kick out of his short, stumbled joyrides. But right now, the whole concept of skateboarding is just a Roman guard staff plunged into his gut, and the stabbing pain will only get worse when you tell him where the bands have to set up. What I thought about, an image that came into my mind while I was reading this is that I often, I don't know why, but I have images in my head of Ben on a skateboard, and he's always got like a cigarette dangling out of the corner of his mouth. Mr. Famous's tolerance is hard to read. You try to prepare yourself for his reactions, but it is difficult. Franklin has a propensity for panic attacks, and one of the fearful, confounding elements of panic attacks is that the panic attackee hardly ever knows when the attacks are going to surface, and to what degree the panic will take control. The anxiety can be minimal, causing a slight uneasiness, a clamminess of the skin, but a larger attack can make the victim run from a room sweating, dizzy, heart-pounding, and in Franklin's case, swearing at and insulting everyone in sight. But there is a personality trait you both share that helps to at least put his responses within a range for you to look at and make decisions by. Both of you, at one time or another, has said to the other that the larger the problem, the easier it is to deal with. It is the little annoyances and deceptions that add up and can cause a feeling of helplessness. Actually, I just told the person this the other day. There's a girl in a band, Christine, in a band called Screeching, Weasel, and I had told her that me and Ben would often say these things. This helplessness can then shoot off into countless combinations of many different directions: insecurity, anger, paranoia, fear, panic. And in most cases, it leaves you, J.J. Bunkbed, paralytic, unable to make the most simple choices. So the challenge is to discover what the boundaries are of this specific situation. For you, the preposterousness of playing in the middle of this battlefield to a bunch of tiny soldiers who would rather skate than watch your band is precisely what makes this one worth pursuing, if only once. And, most importantly, it will be an honor to play with Swindle Parlor. You genuinely like those guys. It can also be considered a rehearsal for the upcoming larger and more momentous show Otto set up for them later in the evening back at Filthy Sadie's Tavern. That's Dirty Nelly's in Palatine. This seems a possible rationalization for Franklin, too, but sometimes it appears as if he responds in the contrary, just to be contrary. Another of the strange common threads the two of you share, which was discovered early on in this odd partnership, is an interest in the transcendentalist writers, specifically Henry David Thoreau and his teacher Ralph Waldo Emerson. In these writings are long-winded rambles that carry on for books and books and pages because they were both learned men of the universities and had much to say. They discuss the contradiction in men's actions and how natural and important this element is in regard to thinking and being. It is part of discovering who you are, and who you are is not always what you do and what you say on any particular day. The Transcendentalists say it is foolish to worry about consistency because what an intelligent person believes tomorrow, if she trusts oneself, may be completely different from what that person thinks and believes today. Emerson said that foolish consistency is the hobgoblin of little minds. The trueness of who we are transcends what we see and hear. It is all part of Thoreau's famous idea of marching to your own drummer. I actually had a plaque of that was always in my room since a kid. I can't remember if my mom, I think my brother actually made it for me. In our transcending the surface, we discover who we are as individuals. By the study of nature and the analogies that surface within nature, both environmental and human, we can become better, more self-confident, and peaceful, and yet proud and courageous enough to fight for individuality and simultaneously a small, significant part of a whole. Wow. I wrote that. Some of that was based on Ralph Waldo Emerson, but no, I'm sorry. I was impressed with my own writing. I will continue. Transcendentalism also tries to balance the contradictory parts of a personality. An aspect of our nature wants to be one with the world, and another simultaneous part wants to withdraw and remain untarnished, unique, and separate. Oh, that's me to a core. The difficulty is figuring out how to balance these with opposing personality traits without appearing fickle or crazy. Or in your case, chaos and confusion. How can you put these theories into action? I don't know. You don't know where we're playing? No, I don't know. I just don't know if you'll want to play after I tell you where we are supposed to set up. Franklin is getting visibly frustrated with you. He is easily annoyed by the apparent avoidance of an inevitable truth being told. They want us to play on that little stage over there. On the fucking ramp? Are we a band or piñatas? Does this prepubescent promoter really want us to put our lives in the hands of these pathetic, pockmarked babies on their vehicles of mass destruction? The humorous tone Franklin has adopted in this short, poetic stringing together of insults and alliterations hints that he isn't really that upset with the situation. He, too, is looking forward to playing these Swindle Parlor songs. It is hard to know what he would have decided to do if Swindle Parlor wasn't hard up for cash after having to already cancel a week's worth of shows. In short, Franklin, yes. Fuck it. We'll do it. Let's finish bringing the equipment. Sure thing, Chief. Is that Vittles over there rubbing his elbow? Yes. Shouldn't he be wearing some kind of armor and chainmail or elbow pads or cotton swabs? He's a young whippersnapper. He'll be fine. I'm not worried about his safety. I'm worried he won't be able to bang on the drums hard enough with 2 broken arms. As Franklin walks out to the van, you turn to look at Vittles. He has gotten back on a skateboard and is now racing across the floor. He's approached by another kid. The kid points to a ramp over in the corner. They speed over to it. The kid approaches the tramp, zooms up it, and flies through the air and lands on his feet a few yards away. Vittles approaches the ramp and falls flat on his face at the bottom of the ramp. He throws his skateboard over the head of the kid. It smashes against the wall and rolls away. He giggles. He chases his skateboard and then carries it back to the van. A few moments later, you walk outside and see Franklin balancing on the stationary skateboard, waving one leg in the air and yelling in a frog-like voice, "Surf's up, dude!" Soul Food, Vittles, and Eggert are gathered around him, rolling over in hysterics, holding their stomachs. The whole entourage, including Skunk, Marianne, Amber, and Mickle, carry the equipment onto the small raised stage in the middle of the 4 ramps. Most of the kids ignore these activities, and only once in a while skid up to the crew to ask who's playing tonight. They don't care. There are a few punks standing on the outskirts watching from a distance. They are here to see the bands. You can tell because they try their hardest to look indifferent, and yet you catch them pointing to members of Swindle Parlor and whispering to each other. When the show begins, these outskirt punks saunter up to the stage and gather at either end, swaying back and forth, avoiding renegade skateboards. Most stand with their arms crossed, or the punk girls' standard pose of one arm hanging down and the other arm across the body with a hand holding the elbow, and all body weight shifted to the left or right hip. Wow. I just saw someone... Actually, there was a band I just saw the other night in Los Angeles that... while she was playing, she was doing that. She was actually, I think when she was hanging on a note, she would put her hand behind her back and grab her elbow. What's the name of the band? Something Corpses. They were playing with the Ted Leo band. Can't remember their name. Anyway, the more Little Less Unknowns set list is short, and the performance is not memorable. All you can remember is the moment when a skater zoomed up the ramp in front of you and skimmed your nose with the bottom of his board. Maybe one of the reasons I couldn't remember is because I actually thought Vittles, Brian Verman, was there, and I couldn't picture him when actually Aaron played drums for us. The crowd was not very enthusiastic, and there was no monetary or promotional gain for the band, but that wasn't why this show was taking place. You and Mr. Famous were about to play with Swindle Parlor. This was exciting. Their band was just another band like the more Little Less Unknowns. They were not on any higher of a plateau, but that may have been why it was so special for the two of you to perform for one day with them as bandmates. To be amongst musicians that you respect and aware of the equality of your... Let me start that again. It sounds like a good sentence. To be amongst musicians that you respect and aware of the equality of your own talents is the essential ingredients of a respectful music scene, with no need for serious competition, just mutual admiration. How true is that? This made it feel important, maybe not for the musical or political world at large, but at least for the personal, character-forming worlds of J.J. Bunkbed and Franklin Famous. Thanks, guys. I hope you enjoyed that. That's the end of Chapter 10. Naperville is around 49 minutes away.